Hello everybody, welcome back to another story time with Critical Rocket, and today we're looking at a story called Max from Battletechnology issue 4, and this one is going to be a little bit different compared to previous stories that I've, narrated, let's say. So, hope you enjoyed this one. Me and the bro like this one just for the different idea in it, and hope you do too. Hope you enjoy. We just finished our contract on Cassius. I had a few days to kill before lifting off planet, and Pete's place seemed like a good place to start. Sometimes I think there must be a factory someplace that manufactures port town dives like Pete's to spec. You know the kind of place. Dark, not overly clean, with neon ads on the walls, overpriced rock gut in the patrons, and from someplace overhead music throbbing like PPC thunder. It was quiet when I went in though, with only one old soldier sitting at the bar watching Pete wipe down the counter. Even though he was in civvies, I knew that this was a man who moved from world to world, fighting for a living. How? Like calling to like, I guess. When you hang out with them long enough, you get so you can pick them out of a crowd of about 20 meters. I greeted Pete, bought a drink, started to search the pockets of my fatigues for a smoke. The soldier noticed and passed over a pack and a lighter. I nodded, sat back, made the conversation the situation called for, all about the weather, the inevitability perhaps, the problems of life. He seemed to want to talk, and I didn't mind listening. I've learned over the years that you learn more when you listen, rather than talk. His name was Sam Williams, and he'd been a tech for 35 years. That's one hell of a lot of mech dreck, I said, and he smiled. I'd served with the mech tech gang a time or two when times were lean, and I had more than a mech warrior's usual charge of sympathy for the bolt twisters. It was a filthy job. Oh, mech dreck is the composite of lubricant, coolant, grease, and sealer compound that has to be drained from a mech slider assemblies and joint capsules every time the beasts are serviced, just so you know. But don't ever let anyone tell you that techs aren't worth their weight in unalloyed platinum. I enjoy it, he said. The metal jockey's got on my nerves, but I like it. Or I used to. There was pain there, but I didn't know what. I wondered if I should get him on with a different track. What unit you with, Sam? He eyed my unit flashes and grinned. For the past 15 years, I've been Colonel Hurvich's personal tech. I nearly spilled my drink. No wonder the guy was in civvies. Colonel Hurvich? Hurvich's Hurricanes? The Hurricanes, they were a merc unit with a pretty fair rep. The last I'd heard, they were working for House Kurita. 2 weeks before, I'd been fighting them toe-to-toe less than 500 clicks north of where we were just sitting. I thought the Hurricanes had pulled out. We'd beaten them, in fact, in a running battle just outside Johannes. It'd been a tough fight, and my Wolverine still showed the scars. Hurvich's men were good. So they did, he replied. We almost had you guys at Johannes, pulling that flanking maneuver at Drywall's. That was a good move. Yeah, that was my company, I said carefully. What was a Kurita tech doing here? I'm Company A, Andrew's Avengers. He nodded. Thought so. Colonel knew he couldn't hold that hill above the town once your company came tearing through our flankers. He had to wheel north and save what he could. There was a long pause while he tossed off the last of his drink. It wasn't much. What do you mean? Our salvage party's only pegged around 5 mech carcasses after your people had pulled out. That was out of, what, 36? 30, right. But it cost the Colonel Max. Who? Well, who's Max? I wasn't sure I liked the direction in which this conversation was going. It was strange enough to be sitting there talking to a man whose buddies I'd been shooting at recently. It was a lot stranger to hear the bitterness in his voice and to wonder if he was thinking that my unit, Andrew's Avengers, was to blame for his misfortunes. I glanced over my shoulder a time or two, suddenly uncomfortably aware of a large, dark and empty room at my back. I suggested we take a fresh round of drinks to a booth, one in the corner where I could have my back to the wall. And he agreed. Max, he explained as he sat down, is an AS-7D assault mech. An Atlas. He's old, but I spent the past 5 years totally rebuilding and fine-tuning the systems and chassis. Hell, Max is better than new now. Some of the parts are getting hard to find, and it took some doing to get them. I spent so much time with him, he's like a person to me. I don't know where the name came from, he's just Max. He was at Drywell's? That's right, he was the Colonel's mech. Was? Colonel's luck broke with Drywell's when he had to abandon our port at Johannes. Now I'm delivering Max to a cheap slime bucket of a captain. I waited. Williams appeared to be considering whether or not to go on with the story. When we lost Johannes, we lost our ride home. A jump ship was supposed to be insistent to pick us up in another month, but when we lost the port, the Kurita forces had to pull out faster than expected, and they didn't have room aboard their precious jump ships for the likes of us. Oh no. I nodded sympathetically. It was a raw deal, the one I'd heard before, all too often. A unit was left at the mercy of an employer who controlled the jump ships upon which interstellar trade and combat depended. House Kurita was notorious amongst merc units for tossing them to the wolves when it suited them. Anyway, there was this one captain with the Kurita regulars who had it in for mercs in general, and us in particular. It happened he had ships, or rather, his family did, and he'd arranged for transport for us if we met his price. As we're going to understand. And his price was? Max. His mouth twisted into a bitter half smile. Oh, and me, of course, to look after him. So what are you doing here? Your unit must have boosted a week before we took the port. They did. They're on their way home by now. Nah, I'm waiting around here with our Max for a new owner to show up. You don't sound very happy about it. Happy? No, you don't know what this guy's like. I was happy with the Hurricanes, but now I belong to Captain Philando Sandoval of the Proserpina Hussars. Sandoval? Electric shocks rushed down my spine. I could feel my hackles rise at the mention of that name. Oh yeah, I knew the Sandovals quite well. You see, I'm from Delacruz, and the Sandovals, they control that planet. Control, no. The word is own. That's closer to the truth, since they control 3/4 of the industry there. Oh, the name of the planetary chairman is an old Kurita Pole named Murasaki, but 8 of the 12 men on the council are Sandovals, and Murasaki himself is a brother-in-law to the old patriarch. My father was with the planetary militia there, and it was a guy named Jose Sandoval who'd accused him of working for the Davian underground on Delacruz in order to get my mother for himself. She died less than a year after my father met with his accident, and I was out and growing up the hard way in the streets of Puerto de la Estrella before I was 15. I was 18 that night in a bar, much like the one we're in now, when I heard Rhaegar Sandoval running off at the mouth about what a great man his uncle Jose was. Okay, so maybe it was too public a place to disagree with the guy, but when he pulled that knife, I had to defend myself, right? The authorities had cleared me of his death by ruling it self-defense, but the Sandovals didn't see it that way, and they declared a blood feud on me. I'd had to leave in a hurry, and I managed to take Rhaegar's Wolverine with me as part payment for my troubles. It had been a long, bloody road from Delacruz to the Federated Suns, and where I'd found a slot with Andrew's Avengers. Sam had me by the arm. You alright, fella? Yeah, but I sure could use another drink. Sam bought the next round, and I managed to stay calm on the outside, but inside I was seething. Is this some kind of Sandoval trap? Can I trust this guy? How can I get the Sandovals one more time? Maybe it was the look in his eyes, or the way he said Sandoval like it felt like a bad taste in his mouth, but I decided I could trust him. So I'm stuck, he said at last. I don't have the money to do anything but go along. All I really know to do is work on mechs. No money? You have an Atlas with a battle mech. Who needs money? You could sign on with any company on the planet, if you didn't mind switching colours from snakes to Davian. It's not that simple. Not that I'd mind hitting back at Sandoval, see. He's got Max locked down tight. They got him hidden and under guard, you know. These past couple of days I've thought about turning him over to your people, believe me, but he's protected. Oh yeah, he's protected. An Atlas, I can imagine. Why don't you tell me a bit more? And he did. There are conventions of warfare, of course. If there weren't, we'd have gone the way of the dinosaurs 500,000 years ago. Those conventions are direct and pretty common sense, most of the time. You don't use nukes, you don't kill civilians, you honour your solemn agreements with the enemy. And Cassius had been divided as a world for several years. It's located in Davian space, right enough, but there'd been a viper's nest of Kuritists squatting on its north continent, and nothing Davian had done had been sufficient to shake them. Cassius's planetary militia had been kept from spreading the nest, but it'd been Andrew's Avengers and a few shiploads of other House Davian Merc units that had finally started rolling back the Curita line on the planet. Our victory at Drywells and Johannes had been the blow that settled things. There was still a big Curita base on the planet, up in the frigid Forvingian wastes, but it was only a matter of time before we starved them into submission. In the meantime, we held Johannes and the lands around it. Though the northern continent was on a Davian world, its people had been under the Curita yoke for a long, long time, and the people in power had been Curitists, at least outwardly. There'd been no revolution when we marched into the city, merely a change of one set of masters for another, and who could tell whether those cheering crowds really did see us as liberators? Some of them, certainly. They'd stand to lose their positions of power should our stay become permanent. It's things like that that made me glad I'm a warrior, not a politician. I was also glad that Andrew's Avengers were scheduled to pull off planet soon. Guerrilla wars with unhappy civilians can be lots more unpleasant than any stand-up fight. Our agreement with the Johannes Proctors was simple and concise and designed to prevent a guerrilla war. We wouldn't interfere with their laws or with their leadership. We'd refrain from looting and pillaging and the other ancient prerequisites of conquering armies, and we'd provide them with protection from any vindictive Curita snakes. They, for their part, would happily rejoin the Davian fold. Max was currently awaiting his new owner, locked away in a privately owned warehouse in the centre of town, a few blocks away from the port. He was guarded, it seemed, by Sandoval's men, at least a platoon's worth of hired thugs, loyal to Sandoval's Seabills. He's disguised as a heavy-duty lifter, Sam explained. We tack-welded sheet metal to break up his outline and make him look bigger and bulkier than he is. The weapons have been dismounted, of course, and are stored in separate boxes that are labelled machine parts. So what was the point? There'll be an independent trader calling in at the port in a few days. Actually, it'll be Sandoval's own private dropship freighter. He'll present a letter of credit to the warehouse for his property, stuff that's already been signed over to his name, including several dozen crates of machine parts and one heavy-duty industrial lifter. He'll just walk Max out of his ship, load on the crates, and away he goes. Just like that, an Atlas. 100 tons of incomparable fighting machine. Sam was right. Max was safe where he was. An Atlas made for mighty tempting loot, but there was no way Colonel Andrews was going to sanction a raid on a privately owned warehouse in the centre of town. An all-out raid sounded too much like looting, and looting a city after it had formally switched sides was a violation of the conventions. More to the point, the Colonel didn't need hostile locals in his rear, not when he still had a Curita fortress ahead of him in the north. Trouble like that in the middle of town was a sure way to win popularity with the natives. The more I thought about it though, the itchier I got. I'd known one guy once who had his stinger shot to scrap around him. He ejected and he walked away fine without a scratch. But then he just turned a laser pistol on himself and burned out his own brains. That mech had been all he had. When it was gone, he'd had no more reason to live. A battle mech, any battle mech, was pure, raw treasure. The whole reason and purpose for some men's lives. And an Atlas? It was even more than that. Maybe it needn't work out just that way, I said slowly. How much is the letter of credit gonna cover? 1 million Seabills. Looked like a legal transaction, and let him load his cargo without customs check on the other formalities. Actually, it'll be payment for Sandoval's local agents. Who are they? He shrugged. Dunno. Someone in the local underground. There were several rival gangs under the Curitists, and I imagine it'll be business as usual under Davian now. Maybe. Maybe. What do you have in mind? I'm not sure. But maybe we can arrange to find a new home for Max? On this side of the Curita frontier. Hold it. You want Max, sure. But if you want him, you take me too. I nodded. If you're as good a tech as you say you are, that'll be no problem. Hell, the Colonel's always complaining he didn't have enough techs. I went on to explain what I had in mind. I could almost see the thoughts moving across his face. Is this guy for real? Can I trust him, or is this some kind of trap? This could be the break I'm looking for. Can I do this? Can you make that sort of commitment? No, I said. Honestly, I can't, but Colonel Andrews can. Let's take it up with him. With our lift-off so close, I knew the Colonel would be in his office at the spaceport compound. When we arrived, he was just finishing lunch and hadn't started back to work. He looked Sam and me over as we entered the office and said, I think I'm in trouble. I introduced Sam, sketched out my plan. The Colonel listened carefully, not interrupting. When I laid the whole thing out, he asked Sam a question or two and then said, "Would you mind waiting outside, please, Sergeant Williams?" As the door closed, he said, "You've come in here with some wild schemes in the past, but this has got to be an all-time high, even for you. I mean, we're not talking a few spare parts of questionable origin here, or a little contraband. We're talking about an atlas and 1 million C-bills, man. I know it's a lot, Colonel. I think we could pull it off. I have 300,000 of my own to put in, and we can use my Wolverine as collateral for the rest. I just think what we could do with an atlas in the company." I paused, scared like I'd never been in my life. The 300,000 was my entire share for the Cassius operation, and the Wolverine, it was all I owned. But an atlas. His eyes narrowed. "Daryl, just what do you know about this Williams character anyway?" I knew what he was thinking. We'd not seen the atlas. It could all be a scam with a wild story as bait. In fact, the more I thought about it, the shakier his story sounded. "I've got a feeling about him, sir." "Oh, God." "I think Sam's on the level. I can manage the money. I'll need some help from some of the guys, though, to pull this off and keep it inconspicuous." "You're going to walk an atlas down the street, son? That doesn't sound inconspicuous to me." "We'll keep a low profile," I said. "Look, we'll keep the atlas out of sight, so the locals don't know it's stolen. I think we can work it out." The Colonel put his hands on his head, leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. I didn't say anything more, not when he was this deep in thought. After the longest couple of minutes I've ever spent, he said, "Okay, you're on, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You, Daryl, are in charge of the operation. The responsibility is yours." "Me, sir?" "You, sir, and God help you if you're wrong, because I sure as hell won't." I picked up Sam on the way out, and we went to look at my brothers. Well, they're not my flesh and blood relations, but they were like family to me when I joined the Avengers. We pulled a scam or two in our time. Mech warrior David Darrell was our disguise and camouflage expert, and to the rest of the company we were twins, Daryl and Daryl. Larry Castellano, he was our forgery expert, the guy people in another unit came to with C-bills in hand whenever they needed to forge a pass to slip into town. Glenn Adams, he was our resident computer expert. Me, I'm the scrounger and contact man. The four of us made quite a team, and we'd pulled quite a few, shall we say, unsanctioned operations, and not all of them against the enemy. There was the time when the Colonel needed a KR valve fitting for his Warhammer's fuser, and there were none to be had anywhere. Well, that construction gang at the port was hardly using the loader of theirs at all, and we knew it used a KR fitting, and that's another story. I found them at the barracks anyway, filled them in on the details. Glenn frowned and turned to Sam. "This, cargo consignment that Sandoval's paying 1 million C-bills for, it's got an inventory number, right?" "Yeah." "You have it?" Sam fished in his jacket pocket, pulled out a slip of paper and handed it to Glenn. "Yeah, just give me a second," he said. He turned to the computer and he sat up on the empty packing crates he'd used for a desk. His fingers clacked across the keyboard for a few minutes as his screen showed a succession of cryptic symbols and lines of code. We took a seat while we waited because Glenn had us and the rest of the world tuned out. "Huh," he said at last. "Huh? What?" David asked. "Now that's really sneaky." "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. "Running a program I call Phantom. I thought we might be able to use it to crack the inventory control program at the warehouse." "You're tapped into that warehouse's computer?" He looked a bit bewildered, as though he was beginning to wonder what he'd wandered in on. "Sure," Glenn said. "I've had this line in for weeks." "Aha! That's where you've been getting the imported scotch." "Nowhere but they'll never miss a few bottles. We have a little business on the side," I explained. "Some of the boys in the other unit, they pay well for a bottle of the good stuff every so often. Glenn here's been having it shipped to them direct. I didn't know where he was getting it from." "Yeah, well, I figured we could do the same thing with Max." It's not going to work here, though." "Why not?" They've got a trap in the programming and an alarm, and damned if I can see a way around it." He went on to explain how the warehouse program worked. "This thing works on 2 levels. You bring your letter of credit in from the bank, and a guy in the warehouse scans the transaction number and the value into the computer. The computer checks with the bank to make sure there's enough money there to cover the transaction. It also checks the transaction number with a transaction number already stored in memory. If it matches, it releases the merchandise. That's the first level where it reads things." "Okay, so it can read," I said. "The transaction number, that's the problem, isn't it?" "Right. It's the number on Sandoval's letter of credit, and we don't know what that is. We'll have a transaction number on our own letter of credit, but it won't match the one that's on the computer. Normally the way to handle that would be to break into the warehouse computer, change the number to ours, and then when the computer's scanned, it would match. But there's a second level to the warehouse program. He then pointed at the screen, where a meaningless ramble of letters and numbers portended something of a significance to Glenn, but not to the rest of us. That son of a gun is set with an electronic tripwire. We try to rewrite the code, sends an alarm. To who? The Proctors? I don't know. Let me check. His fingers clattered at the keyboard again, blanking lines of print and causing new ones to appear. Nope, he said after a moment. It goes to an unlisted terminal in the city. I've got a search program running, but it'll need some time to track it down. Can we get around it? Getting in to change the number is no problem. Stopping that alarm, that's the problem. I'd have to take over the whole port warehouse computer from here, and I just don't have the megs for that. Now there's another approach. His eyes glazed over as he thought the problem through. Yeah, I can stop the alarm, but I might delay it for a while by messing with the port communications system. How long will that last? Good question. 20, maybe 25 minutes? I can make it look like a terminal's down and the backups are blown, but I won't stop them forever. Sam nodded. That would be enough time. The warehouse is only a few blocks from here. Yes, but everything would have to go perfectly, and we'd be cutting it mighty fine. If we have to start jogging that sucker back here, we'd attract a bit of attention. Glenn, how long would it take to change that number? Not long. 4 or 5 minutes to access through Phantom, a few keystrokes to change the number. So, we go to the warehouse of our letter of credit. We send you a signal just before we go inside. You change the number and start doing your wizardry with the alarm. We walk in like Sandoval's agents, collect Max, walk him back up to the ship. Anyone sees us, we're just another cargo consignment bought and paid for on our way to the port. Maybe, Glenn said. But sooner or later that alarm is going to go through and reinforcements will be on the way. Larry had pulled out a map of the warehouse compound, his finger probed along the tangle of streets and alleyways surrounding it. Could we block them off somehow? It'd have to be some distance away from the warehouse. If they see Max strolling into the port, they'll guess for sure where he's gone. It'd help if we knew where the alarm was going. Glenn's computer chose that moment to bleep as its search program came to an end. I peered across Glenn's shoulder and saw the listing of an address. You have but to ask, Glenn said. Allied Import and Export, 1430 Delta Chiaro Quadrant. Jimmy the Geek, I said. Part of the, shall we say, underground colour. I'm shocked, David said. The company you keep. Hey, Twin, I'm the contact man, right? Where do you think we arranged for those surplus lasers they needed over in Captain Langley's company? Sandoval must trust him, David said. Sandoval doesn't trust anyone, I replied, but 1 million C-bills will buy a guy a lot of loyalty and manpower. He must have his gang watching the place. With reinforcements a few minutes away, if that alarm's triggered. Neat. Slick and neat, yeah, said Glenn. Okay, I said, let's make arrangements with the Colonel. We'll need men and equipment for this one. My mind raced from possibility to possibility, weighing each in turn. Blocking the road sounded good, but how? A truck? It wouldn't take him long to move that. A wreck with a truck? That's more like it. What if they just walk around it, though? Fire? Explosion and fire? Don't get carried away. We could always shoot them. Yeah, real low profile, that. How about a hover truck piled with hive cargo? Override the safety system, cut one side of the blower system, dump the cargo. That sounds okay. They might still push past it, though. Some of our boys could be on hand. Give them an argument? Nah. They could be chasing the guy that stole the Colonel's truck. I'll need to get a bunch of boys to go along. Have to clear it with the Colonel. Yeah, that might work. But it had to go off that night. Had to. The Colonel had done some checking with some contacts of his own at the Port Authority and learned that the independent drop freighter Estrelita was due in port tomorrow at local dawn. We had that long to beat Sandoval to his treasure. I had the letter of credit in my hand late that afternoon as we walked along the street towards the warehouse entrance. The Colonel had come through on that one, arranging for selling my Wolverine to another Merc commander and transferring the money and my share of the Cassius profits to a Comstar facility in town. It felt strange. That letter of credit for 1 million C-bills represented everything I had in the world, and I was about to trade it away on the wildest gamble I'd ever taken. was beginning to understand what that dead Stinger pilot must have felt like. If this failed, I'd be without a mech. Dispossessed. It was not a happy feeling. And the second thoughts crowded into my mind. This is too easy, we've missed something, this has got to be a trap. The scariest part of the whole setup was the fact that we had to get Max away clean, without being seen by anyone who could tie us to Andrew's Avengers. Did Jimmy the Geek have his goons patrolling the streets around the warehouse? Or was he relying on the booby trap in the computer system? I kept turning the things that could go wrong over in my mind as Larry, David, Sam and I made our way through the streets of Johannes toward the warehouse. Then Larry pulled us up short with a hand signal from the corner. Security guard. Yeah, that's one of the Geek's apes, said David. Seen him before hanging around looking ugly the last time we were here. Think he'll recognize us? I asked. The thug was standing in front of the warehouse door looking a bit stiff and uncomfortable in the blue pants and jacket for the Cassie and Proctor's security. We could try to bluff our way past him, but if he recognised us, people would put two and two together once it was discovered that Max was gone. Another figure from this one, now in rough civilian clothes, detached itself from the shadows by the warehouse and moved across the pavement to the side of the guard. I'll bet that guy with him is the same boss. I'll bet money they're hanging around to watch the warehouse. What are we going to do about them? David asked. We can't just blast them. Sam opened the flat metal case he was carrying and pulled something out, tucked the object into his waistband of his pants underneath the jacket that he was wearing and closed the case. I'll take care of them, he said. Two of you give me a 10-second count, then follow. One of you stay here and cover. Then he vanished around the corner. I caught David's eye, questioning, then shrugged. I guess we had to trust him. We gave Sam his 10 seconds and then followed after him, and while Larry drew the deadly little holdout automatic he always carried and prepared to cover us. As we swung out into the street in front of the warehouse, Sam glanced back at us over his shoulder, then hunched forward, clutching the case tighter, walking a little faster. As he got closer to the two men, they turned to face him, suspicion heavy on their dull faces. Officer! Officer! Those two men! They've been following me. I think they want to rob me. The two shifted their attention from Sam to us as the tech stepped behind them, as if looking for protection. The security guard's hand was already dropping toward the holster strapped to his hip, and then Sam reached under his jacket and brought up a stunner. We heard the weapon buzz twice in rapid succession, and the two goons slumped to the street. Very nice, I said. Quiet, too. I glanced nervously at the empty windows lining the street, wondering if anyone there had caught our performance. David, you and Larry take a walk around the area and see if we have any more company. Sam, give me a hand. We dragged the two slumbering goons off the street and hid them under some trash in an alley next to the warehouse. Larry and David were back a moment later, giving us the all clear. There seemed to be nothing about to tie us to the scene. I keyed my comm line open. This is Red Dog leader to group, I said softly. We are in position. Do you copy? Roger. I heard the voice in the earplug receive my ear. Phantom is running, I say. Phantom is running. 5 minutes to access the warehouse computer, change the transaction number, 20 minutes before the alarm would go out. If we were lucky, my plan wasn't looking so good now. Larry and David spread out across the street, taking their lookout positions, and the next part of the show was up to Sam and me. And Glenn, back at the compound, pecking away at the keyboard. Phantom to Red Dog leader, Glenn's voice said after an agonizing wait. We have a go. That was it. We entered the warehouse. A bored-looking clerk sat behind a desk window near the entrance. I tried to assume an expression of boredom as profound as I had walked up to the window and handed him the paper. Morning, Sam, the clerk said as he took the credit letter from me. Thought you were coming to pick up your stuff until tomorrow. Change of plan, he said. I heard the tightness in his voice. The clerk inserted the letter in the scanner on his desk, tapped out a command on his console. Nothing happened. I had a sinking feeling. Who is scamming who? Just how much do we know about Sam, former Curita Tech, employee of the Sandoval's? The clerk smacked the computer with a flat of his hand, then tried again, and the screen lit up with confirmation. Just have to know how to talk to these things, he said. First passage to the right, second cage to the right. Need any help? No, Sam said. Need transport? Nah, that's why I brought this metal jockey along. All I have to do is keep him from wrecking it. We threaded our way through the warehouse, wire mesh cages rising on every side, most piled high with crates and shipping containers, cargo consignments awaiting transport off-world to other worlds or to other parts of the planet. Sam led the way to the cage where he'd stored Max. I don't think I'd realised until that moment just what a job we were trying to pull off. Max was big. A literal mountain of metal, 12 meters tall, filling the cage. I could see where the cage door had been cut and reworked just to walk him in. Sam started to reach for the lock to the cage door, then stopped. "Someone's messed with this," he said. "I put some powder with a static charge on the lock and frame when I was here last. It's gone now." "The watchman making his rounds?" I suggested. "We were 5 minutes into our 20-minute countdown already." "Maybe." He put his case on the floor and opened it. "You think it's our friends?" "I hope so," he replied. "We certainly don't need anyone else in on this." He removed a small pouch with tools in it from his case. He selected one and pushed it into the corner of the lock frame. It popped open and he looked inside. "Someone's added an extra little something." "Sam, I don't mean to bother you or anything, but the clock's ticking." Yeah, I know." He went to work on the lock, and it took him only a moment to cut some wires and touch the two together, producing a solid click from the door. It felt like hours for him to do this. He smiled as he touched the control and watched the cage door slide open with a whir of electric motor. Another alarm trigger. He replaced the tools, then pulled a small device from his case, a rectangular box with a pair of antennae protruding. "Sam, I know." 10 minutes, Sam, I know." He made a sweep of the cage interior, passing the antenna across the walls. "Time!" We were already behind schedule, the minutes flicking past. "Time!" I'm going as fast as I can. I looked up at Max towering above us. Up close his disguise was pretty bad. A collection of sheet metal plates and assorted junk lightly welded to arms and legs and torso to disguise the combat machine's outline. The whole concoction painted a neutral grey. I could just barely make out the tracings of an older camouflage pattern concealed beneath the most recent coat of paint. Sam looked up at the cliff of metal. "What have you got?" "A tracker," he said. "Something electric. Something active to make my sniff ear bleep. Bring me my case." He selected the tool, a pair of forceps wrapped with insulation wire, and used them to remove something that looked like a blister in the paint on Max's foot. Gingerly, he carried the bubble of paint across the cage, slipped it through the wire, and placed it on a cargo container in the cage next to ours. "Let them track that," he said, with a nasty smile. "All clear now, let's go." Sam put everything away in his case, slung it from a strap across his shoulder, and then led the way to Max's leg. He opened a panel, touched the control, and the boarding ladder slid down out of the tangle of metal above us. He started climbing, and I followed after, hand over hand up past the monster machine's legs, past the clutter of sheet metal around his torso, curving in toward the back left shoulder to where Sam was unlocking the massive hatch in the back of his head. We were 16 minutes into the count at this point. The hatch swung back with a hiss. He scrambled in, and I squeezed in after him. If this is a trap, now's the time to spring it, I thought. Sam reached across the pilot's seat and tapped in an access code. "I'm setting it for a new operator. You'll have to tune it for yourself." I slipped into the seat, reached over my head, and brought down the massive neural helmet on a spaghetti tangle of wiring and cables, positioned it over my head, and then lowered it into place. I hesitated as I reached for the power switch. He could be an assassin. This could all be an elaborate setup just to get me. Who? The Sandovals, of course. Blood feud. Jose Sandoval could have set the whole thing up just to cook me. If he's an assassin, I'm dead meat. I glanced to where Sam was crouching next to me, studying the control readouts of a superhuman intensity. And if not, I made a good friend. I hit the switch. The familiar surge of power, of sensation flooded through my helmet. Console displays lit up, oscilloscope waveforms fluttered, meshed, then coalesced, as Max's computer sought my brainwave patterns, and conformed to them. Through the neural helmet, through the nerves of my inner ears, I sensed Max's own sense of balance, sensed his body coming alive around me. I could breathe again. Sam was shouting in my ear, "Just take it real easy with Max. He handles like a dream." I nodded, letting my hands get the feel of the controls in front of me. Gently, I guided Max into a stoop, stretching his arms out and down to gather the crates stacked alongside one side of the cage. There were 3 of them, heavy, bulky things. Max straightened up with the loads as if it were a stack of empty cardboard boxes. I tried a tentative step, and then another. I made him duck as we stepped through the enlarged cage door and into the warehouse proper. 20 minutes. Please God, just a little longer. I keyed open the comm. "Red Dog Leader to Red Dog 1, we're coming out." "Red Dog 1 to Leader," David's voice replied. "It's clear. Come on." Step upon ponderous step, we made our way through the dimly lit warehouse, careful of the wooden crates in Max's arms. Late afternoon sunlight spilled in from a widening gap in the wall ahead as the clerk at the desk had opened the main warehouse door. On the street, I caught sight of Larry and David moving across. There was no one else about. "Max moves like a dream," I said to Sam. "Good God, I think we're actually going to pull this thing off." He grinned and nodded, but then another voice was cutting in from the comm frequency, urgent and sharp. "Phantom to group! Phantom to group! The message has been delivered! I say again, the message has been delivered!" I glanced at my wrist set. We were 22 minutes into the countdown, and Glenn, our first line of defense, he was out of the fight. Now it was up to the rest of the company to delay reinforcements as long as possible. We still had a long way to go. "Shadow 1 to group, we have a target on the move. A brown, open-top hovercraft with 6 big dudes in it. Point Alpha is destination. I say again, Point Alpha. ETA, Shadow 2's position in 30 seconds. Do you copy Shadow 2? Copy Shadow 1. Hound to Fox 1, we are on. Let's go. Fox 1 to Hound 1, moving. Don't chase too close. Roger that, Fox 1. Shadow 2 to group, target passing. ETA Point Alpha, 1 minute." I could follow the entire scene, listening to the radio chatter playing out just as we planned it that afternoon back at the port. 2 of the guys from our command lance were Shadow 1 and Shadow 2, the lookouts to warn of the approach of reinforcements. Fox 1, he was one of the company trucks, and it was piled high with crates of scrap metal, being driven as though it had just been stolen from the spaceport compound. Hound 1 was our own muscle, a couple more Company A mech warriors and a dozen riflemen from our support platoon, pretending to chase the truck thief, most carrying handguns with a scattering of laser pistol and stunner. "Fox 1, I'm going in now. Hound 1 to group, the Fox has crashed across the street, nice scatter on the cargo, we're moving up now. Fox 1 is out of the truck. Ah, here come the clowns." I had backs up to speed now, striding through the streets toward the port gate. Here and there, townspeople all on the street would give us incurious glances as we thundered past. Giant lifters and loader mechs were common sights along the back streets of any spaceport town. They'd never seen anything like Max before, of course, but then we wouldn't look entirely out of place. "Shadow 1 to group, more company coming, 2 more hovercraft, and these guys mean business. Hound 1 to Shadow 1, what do you have? Can't tell, Hound, but there's lots of them. I see armoured vests and assault rifles. Proctors? No uniforms, Hound, just guns and mean expressions. Shadow to group, I see a couple of portable SRMs. Ah, shit!" My blood went cold. Petty thugs and gangsters we could handle, but it sounded like a small army was converging on the scene we'd just staged. Handguns against assault rifles was not a good thing, and if those jokers were carrying portable rocket launchers too. The port gate was just ahead. A few more steps and I'd be through with none the wiser. "Hey! Those guys are shooting at it, watch us! Hound 1 to group, Hound 1 to group, we are under attack. I see 3 light civilian hovercraft, assault rifles and lasers, watch it, get down!" A confused gabble from my helmet speakers. I could hear the distant crackle of gunfire over the comm line. I could hear the nerve-tearing shriek of someone who was wounded. "Hound 2 to group, Hound 1's been hit. 1 enemy hovercraft has slipped past position, moving to our rear. The others have us engaged from the front." The whole plan was coming apart as I listened. They had most of our company back there, cut off and surrounded. "Red Dog 2 to group, enemy hovercraft at warehouse now, it's cutting back on Fox and Hound from the rear." Gunfire was chattering at this point. "Red Dog 2 to group, we are under fire." I brought Max to a halt, stooped and gently set the weapons crates on the street at the feet of an astounded woman who was carrying a baby. Then I brought him around and pushed the controls forward, urging the 100-ton behemoth into a lumbering run. I half expected a protest from Sam, but he remained at my side, clinging to the arm of the chair, silent and grim. He could hear the radio chatter coming from the cabin speaker, and knew the score as well as I. Fox and Hound groups were pinned in the street behind the wreckage of the truck, with 2 hovercraft in front of them and a 3rd keening up on the street in their rear, its blowers kicking up dusts and paper trash in the pavement. I could see civilians scattering down the streets. I could see 2 running figures, which could only be Larry and David, trying to outrun the 3rd racing hovercraft toward the company's position. "We don't have weapons," Sam reminded me. "I know. The 3rd hovercraft's pilot must have seen Max coming. How could he miss us?" The vehicle skittered around on sharply balanced air jets. I saw a flash from the craft's rear deck, saw a glowing speck arc towards my face, unravelling a twisting string of white as it came. The missile struck Max in the chest with a flash and a hammer blow shock which scattered shreds of metal in a whirling cloud. A 2nd SRM streaked toward us, close behind the 1st. "Hang on!" I yelled at Sam, as Max lurched forward, arms and hands extended. The 2nd blast caught Max on the shoulder, but he reached through the flame and shock, metal fingers closing on the hovercraft as its pilot twisted it into a desperate spin to the right. I saw figures leaping from the rear deck, saw one pale face upturned from the driver's compartment, eyes wide with stark terror. There goes our low profile, I thought. A laser rifle flared and ruby light flickered across Max's face. His hands came together. The hovercraft was a bulky toy less than a quarter of Max's height in length. I could hear the fans keening, could feel the craft's thin hull buckling in Max's grip as I raised the machine up from the street. Desperate gunmen scattered in every direction, leaving their weapons on the pavement. No one faces an Atlas willingly, even when they have a mech. A dozen strides brought me up behind the company, still sheltering behind the barricade of the wrecked truck. Beyond, two hovercraft drifted, uncertain as figures half glimpsed through billowing dust scrambled for cover. 3 more infantry portable SRMs fired, their smoke trails streaking through the evening sky. With Max's thick hide they amounted to pinpricks. But Max was one mech, and unarmed. Even he wouldn't last long if the city authorities began mustering their forces, or if these attackers had more reinforcements in reserve. I shifted the controls. Max brought the captive hovercraft above his head. No weapons? I wouldn't say so. I snapped the arms down, sending the hovercraft flailing end over end across the barricade and smack into one of the attacking vehicles. Flames blossomed, blinding in the failing twilight as oily smoke boiled into the sky. The surviving hovercraft side-slipped into a building front, bringing down a shower of concrete which bounced and powdered the street. By the light of the flames I could see the boys of the Avengers dropping back, supporting the handful who were wounded. I stood guard with Max, covering their rear as they made it through the deserted streets back to the compound. I could hear sirens in the distance through his external sensors as the city's proctors began to close in. The port storage warehouse Andrew's Avengers used for storing its groundside equipment gaped invitingly as Max strode through the spaceport gate and into the company compound. A small crowd had gathered inside to greet us, everyone in fact who had not been in the operation in person. I saw the colonel standing there, hand on hips, conveying a definite sense of disapproval. But the rest of the guys were cheering. Our quartermaster was there with a handler mech, a great open framework of a machine with oversized arms and strut supports. "Lay that thing down, Darryl," I heard him call. "Then get the hell out of there, we don't have much time." I guided Max to the ground, and from flat on my back I powered down, pulled off the neuro helmet, and cracked the hatch. Sam wiggled out feet first, and I followed. The Avengers tech crew were already busy swarming across the torso like ants at a carcass. There wouldn't be time to disassemble him completely, but they were going to work at the bolts and fitting at his torso joint, where his legs and lower torso were joined to his upper torso by a broad 360-degree track. As I watched the small company hovercraft keened into the warehouse, and I caught sight of the packing crates containing Max's weapons strapped to the deck. The colonel came up beside us, fire in his eye. "Nice. Low profile, huh?" He was about to say more, but an infantryman came jogging up out of the gathering dark. "Company Colonel, they're on their way here." "Snap it up, people." Hissing and clanking, the loader mech backed Max's upper torso away from the lower. A second loader appeared and helped mech handle the mass of machinery into a trailer platform which trundled away into the warehouse. A second platform hummed to a stop, and 2 loaders repeated the maneuver with his legs. Techs already scouring the floor with hand lights looking for telltale traces of the operation, but there seemed to be nothing more incriminating than a few black patches of mech dreck staining the pavement. And then the local police were there, just outside the warehouse, led by a pompous, beribboned, mustached official with authority written all over him. The colonel strode over to meet them. Sam and I just glanced at each other, then watched the display. We heard nothing but unintelligible shouts. There was a lot of hand-waving on both sides, Sam nudging me in the side and nodded toward a pair of locals off by themselves. One was discreetly waving the antenna of some sort of electronic device across the area, then shaking his head at his friend. I edged a little bit closer. The colonel is one of those individuals who can turn a lovely shade of purple when he gets angry. He was really hitting his stride now. All anyone could do was watch and hope to stay clear of his path. "Whoa there," he said. Was it imagination, or did he manage to actually convey steam coming from his head? "Let me go over this just one more time to be sure I have it right. Some lowlife steals one of my trucks from this compound. My men chase him. The lowlife wrecks my truck, scatters garbage all over your street. A crowd of your security people show up and start opening fire on my men in your town. They claim they're responding to an alarm from a warehouse they've been hired to protect, claim that my people are stealing a mech that doesn't look like a mech, shoot my people. Then they claim that the missing battle mech that doesn't look like a mech is there after all, throwing hovercraft and smashing up your town. My God, what kind of a port are you people running here? It did sound a mite improbable the way he said it. The beribboned fellow looked a bit taken aback as the echo of the Colonel's shout rang from the buildings around us. But the Colonel was just getting started. You hire rabble and thugs to protect your warehouse. You claim my men stole somebody's battle mech, while your men were shooting down people in the street. And now this is the part I love, by the way, it's all my fault. You want me to pay for your truck, your buildings, their hovercraft, and somebody's missing battle mech. You want me to turn my men over for questioning? For a moment, I thought he was going to explode, and it looked like the man with the ribbons thought so too, because he started to step back. Beyond the Colonel, I saw the quartermaster step from the warehouse and move his hand in a subtle OK gesture. The Colonel saw it and nodded. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper, and I had to strain to catch what he said. Take a look to your left, gentlemen. They looked, and so did I. There was a line of battle mechs there. Johnny's Thunderbolt, Casey's Stinger, and Glenn's Shadowhawk. They moved almost silent in the dark, deploying across the field. That, gentlemen, is what a company of battle mechs looks like. You're looking for a battle mech. Take a good look. I'm sure we can come to a reasonable agreement, the official said. David's Wasp lumbered into view, taking up a position near the compound gate. Oh, I'm very sure we can, Mr. Chief Proctor. You say an atlas is missing. You claim that I have it here. Well now, an atlas is a rather large piece of machinery. You want to look through my warehouse? Help yourself. Just remember, anything you unpack, you repack. And my boys are scheduled to boost out of this shithole at 2300. You make me late, I'll forget about convention and turn my boys loose on your town. I'm going to redeploy my recon lance around the area. You can search for your mech, but any attempt to enter this compound by force, any threat against my boys, will be considered a hostile act. And I will act accordingly. He took a step back and raised his voice. Recon lance! Perimeter defense! Execute! Larry couldn't resist the temptation to trigger his Jenner's jump jets and vault the gate and the huddle of security people blocking it. David's Wasp and Glenn's Shadowhawk were close behind, vaulting the fence and deploying opposite directions. The official glanced at his companions. We see your point, Colonel, and perhaps a mistake has been made. We will retire to act accordingly. Do you want to search my warehouse for an atlas? I don't think that will be necessary, sir. Would you like me to turn out my pockets? No, sir, that's fine. And they left. I started to turn to go myself, but I was too late. The Colonel caught my eye, and I saw the anger kindle there anew. You! My office! Now! From his office window I could see the hurrying shadows of my mates under the dazzle of port lights. Our dropship bay doors were open, and the last of our gear and supplies were being hustled aboard. There were port authority people there, watching of course, but they didn't seem anxious to interfere. The hulking shadows of John King's Thunderbolts stood alongside the bay ramp, and the authorities no longer seemed prone to argue. It was a trap after all, he said as I walked in and closed the door. He tossed something onto the desk for me to see. I picked it up. It was a shoulder flash cut from someone's uniform. Kirita Regular Infantry. David took it from one of the jacket of those thugs he was wearing under his armour. Most of them were locals working for Kirita, he gestured, but a few were officers. They were watching Max? Don't look so surprised. Do you think small-time hoods would take that much interest in a mech transfer? Or come armed like a small army? What did they want? I felt weak. Our best guess is that they were watching the Atlas until Sandoval arrived tomorrow. They would act in support. Of what? What indeed? Picture what would happen as our mechs deployed north to face the Kirita Fortress in the Tundra country. Picture our boys guarding the port here, most of them on the town, a few standing sentries going light mechs, Stingers, Wasps. He jerked a thumb toward the dropship, where loader platforms were wrestling a pair of huge packing crates up the ramp. Each must have weighed about 50 tons at least. Then an Atlas appears, right here, smack in the middle of the port we're defending, and using as our supply line. What do you think would happen? It'd be a massacre, all of our supplies and ammunition. All gone. Maybe our dropships too. If the Atlas moved fast enough before the alarm were given, certainly our command couldn't be controlled. The main Davian army up north would then be cut off, and just when the Kuritamex came boiling out of their fortress. Maybe they planned to bring in reinforcements too, I don't know. There are several freighters due tomorrow alongside Sandoval's. I guess it was possible that a sizable contingent of the Proserpina Hussars would have been there. A realisation struck me. Then the locals are helping Kurita. The Proctors were in on it? Maybe. Maybe they too was scared to do anything about it but cooperate. I imagine there are quite a few Kurita agents still in the woodwork here. It's not our problem. I'm putting this all in a report and turning it over to General Richardson at Cassius HQ. He can sort things out. I just pray to God we haven't left him with a guerrilla war in his hands. He spun from the window looking at me right in the eye. As for you, wouldn't you say things got a little out of hand tonight? Well, that's all I can manage. Low profile, right? Keep the Atlas out of sight, right? It seemed like the thing to do at the time, sir. All I can say, mister, is that had better be one hell of a long time before you come in here with any more of your bright ideas. Then the anger evaporated in a grin. Unless it's something really good. He brought out a bottle of imported scotch and a pair of glasses. Let's have a drink, Lieutenant. We lifted it on schedule and left Cassius behind us, boosting for our rendezvous with our regiment's jump ship. I heard later that we passed a small fleet of dropships inbound as we accelerated from orbit, and I hoped that General Richardson was ready for them. Of course, without Max, their plan wasn't likely to work. I could imagine Fernando Sandoval's face hearing the news that his Atlas was gone, getting madder and madder as he wondered who'd done it. Someday I'll meet him and let him know I made that promise to myself now, and to Max. Meanwhile, the colonels reshuffled our company. I'm a lieutenant now, commanding the Avengers A Company Fire Lance. I haven't ridden Max into battle yet, but Sam has him tuned to perfection, sweet and sharp and raring to go. Me? An officer. Well, stranger things have happened. Back in Johannes with Company A surrounded, the roof caving in, I'd felt the responsibility like a lead weight around my neck. Those gold lieutenant bars carried the same responsibility, but somehow they didn't seem as heavy. Hell, I might get used to this kind of responsibility. Sharing it with Max. I think we're going to make out just fine.